Now, I want to move on to point number 2, which, by the way, we're not going to cover all 4. Jake doesn't let us cover all the content once we're in here together. But I love this because I think you have to then communicate the priority of this to the organization. You know, the last question that you just reviewed for us that John talked about is how many people then are they equipping? Mm-hmm. So in this conversation, you're my leader. So your question to me is Chris, how many people are you equipping in order to help us accomplish this mission, this vision we're after? You said this statement. I want to share this with our audience. In one of our leadership team meetings, you came in and you didn't even say hello. You didn't even say, hey, how's everybody's weekend? Whatever. You came in and you said, all right, here we go. You couldn't be here today. Who's sitting in your seat?
Wow. Yep.
And all of us were like, don't pick on me. And you were just like, go. Who is it? Chris, who is it? Right? And so, Becky, who is it? Whatever. And I was like, man, like that. Yeah, that's so good. If we were doing this in a way that we should be doing it as leaders of organization, we would have it right there. But what you were doing was you were implementing and living out this, hey, I'm going to communicate. This is a top priority for all of our people. So talk about that. Talk about the desire that you have as a CEO of the enterprise to make sure that your people and that you are continually emphasizing and communicating the power, and not only the power, but the need, because it's so critical to be developing and equipping your people.
Well, it's so funny because our podcast family is going to think that I'm just this cutthroat, going to kill everybody, cut everybody out, fire everybody kind of leader. I don't think I'm like that, but
no,
maybe I need to go check, because let me tell you why I say that though, Chris. A week ago today, I'm in a meeting with 2 of our leaders. You were not even in the meeting. And I said, guys, who's your replacement? And they looked at me and like, what? And I said, oh, by the way, if something happens to me, who's my replacement? What are y'all going to do if something happens to me?
Yeah.
Now, that's kind of fatalistic, right? And it's so funny that you just reminded me. I'd forgotten about that. You reminded me of a meeting several months ago where I challenged every leader. First thing I came into the meeting was, hey, who's your replacement? What are you going to do? And then I just had that same conversation a week ago. I think, and I justify it with this, the law of the bench. Every leader is prepared. Surprises don't prepare leaders, it reveals leaders. I use all of these illustrations, and that was certainly my point 7 days ago with these leaders. Guys, who are you training for the unexpected? Who is your law of the bench? And I began to articulate to them what I may not have articulated in this leadership meeting that you're referencing. I believe it's the responsibility of every leader to know his players and to strengthen the bench of players on the team. That's not anything earth-shattering or great revealing, I'm sure, to our podcast audience. What's revealing to me when you ask this question today is I told both of those leaders last week who I would replace them with if something happened to them. Now, I was in this meeting, I was really challenging them because we're not moving the ball forward as quickly as I feel like that we should. And I was going, guys, who is your replacement? And be inviting them into it because they probably can make you better. So it wasn't just let's find a replacement. It was who else is brainstorming with you because your replacement may have better ideas than you because you're too close to the challenge.
Yeah. Love that.
But as I'm listening to you ask me that question today, as I'm reminded that I asked that question again 1 week ago, which means I may be asking that question way too much, I realized that while I have a plan on who would be their replacement, I have no intentionality on how I am equipping them today. So what am I going to do, Chris? Am I going to wait to equip my bench when they're actually in the game? Or am I going to equip them while they're on the bench so that if an injury happens, they're able to get right in? Your son plays football. You played football. No coach waits until the injury to equip the second string. The second string is making the first string better by learning the game plan, by scrimmaging with them. In the leadership game, in mine and your company, podcast listeners, are we scrimmaging enough with the backups to make sure that they are equipped when they become a starter?
Yeah.
And I'm telling you this right here, I need to quit recording a podcast and go equip some people because I've got a plan.
Yeah.
I just am not backing that plan up of equipping to make sure they're ready for game day.
Yeah. To further that illustration, and then I'm going to move on to the last point. you look at, now we're biased, we're in the South, so we're big SEC fans. When you look at the level of schools at the highest level in the SEC, the reason they're successful is they have a bench that is ready to step in at any point in time.
Yep.
Injury, draft, next man up. And they talk about that. So do we run our teams like that? Do we run our companies like that? You and I are sitting there shaking our head no together. And
but I was doing that just for our viewers, not for our podcast listeners. I didn't want the podcast listeners to know.
Yeah. And so I love this, right? You got to be communicating this because it has to be a priority, not only to you as a leader. You got to I'm not going to cover point 4, but John lays out an incredible model.
Yeah.
And the first one he talks about is model it. So leaders, before you go communicating this, you need to be modeling it so that then your people understand what that looks like. And that's the first step of the 5 M's that John gives us. Okay.
I would like to talk to you a minute with Maxwell today on developing yourself, growing yourself. Because really what I am is I'm in the people development business. Pretty much I walk into people's life, find out where they are, and then through serving and adding value to them, hopefully help them get better. That's what I do. I'm glad you're with me on A Minute with Maxwell because in about a minute, I can give you a thought or two that would help you to develop yourself because I think most people would like to get better. In fact, if you really don't want to get better, you can just turn Minute with Maxwell off because this is what Minute with Maxwell is all about, helping you get better. What we have to understand about developing ourselves and getting better is that it doesn't take brilliance and it doesn't take a lot of time and it doesn't even take a lot of effort, but it must be intentional. That's the word I want to implant in your mind for a moment. The fact that you don't get better automatically, you only get better because you intentionally make a decision to get better. And here's my word for you today on Minute with Maxwell. Here's how this works. You have to go from being a person of good intentions to a person of good actions. That's the great separator. To develop yourself, you've got to get out of the intending world and get into the doing world. In fact, your good intentions are good intentions, but they're worthless. Totally worthless. The most overrated phrase in the world is good intentions. I know all kinds of people, they have good intentions, but they never do good because they didn't act upon what they knew. So if you want to develop yourself and you want to get better, just act on what you've already expressed that you want to do. The moment you quit talking about it and start doing it, now you've got something. I had a friend named Randy one time who came to me and said, John, your talk talks and your walk talks, but your walk talks a lot louder than your talk talks. That's true. Become a person of action today.
I noticed in the title you said when a leader believes, sees, and develops the potential in others. Why did you start with the word believe?
Yeah, great question. Because of these conversations I'm having, I realize you are not going to be a people developer. You're not going to push people to a higher capacity, to a larger potential. You're just not going to do it if you don't personally believe in people. If you don't believe that I didn't put this in our notes at all, but I got thinking about it as we were talking before the camera came on about even Carol Dweck's mindset piece that you can almost have a fixed mindset about people sometimes. I think, well, they are what they are. No, they're not. It's a growth mindset that I need to have as a leader to really be believing that people can develop, people can grow. And it's going to be up to me, the leader, I have to believe that.
Yeah.
If I don't believe it, I'm not going to probably commit. I've got plenty of other things I've got to go do, and that's going to take a back burner.
Yeah. One of the things I know you've gotten pushback for when you're in front of the room or doing training or maybe even coaching, where you go,
100%.
Yeah, you know where I'm going,
Yeah,
right? Which is like, hey, we need to put 10 on everybody's head on our team. Like,
yeah, but they're not a 10. They're a 4.
Are you putting a 10 onto the team? Yeah, like you get pushback from that, don't you?
Yeah. They're not a 10. They're a 4. I'm not saying they're a 10. I'm saying you see them.
That's right. And that's why this is so important that we're talking about today as leaders, that you have to believe and see the potential of those team members if you ever hope to develop it. Now, let me, just before you go any further, sometimes that it may never come to fruition. You may have the hope and you may see this, but over time and giving them resources and trying to develop them and giving them opportunities and chances, it may not get there, and that's okay. But you have to start at the place of you have to believe and see the potential in others.
Well, people will rise or fall to your level of
That's right.
expectation.
That's
And
right.
I always ask people in coaching, even in front of the classroom, can you tell when someone believes in you, that they think positively about you, when they're interacting with you, when they're talking with you, when they're around you? Can you just tell if somebody thinks highly of you or doesn't think highly of you? And I think most of us can figure out that, yeah, I think they think, well, I raise my game around those people. I don't want to disappoint those people. I actually try to live up to that expectation. And I think so many of us as leaders, we set that. I was just listening to Ed Milet, and I got thinking about how people see themselves, their identity.
Yeah.
And this acts as a thermostat on them. And, you know, a thermostat can heat up the room or cool down the room based on outside circumstances and what you've set it to. Well, if you've set somebody up that they're a 4 or a 5, then anytime they have a winning moment or they're succeeding or advancing, that internal thermostat will just cool them back down to a 5, whatever they are. And I'm thinking, well, you know, if I'm a leader, can I affect that? Can I help them to see capacity, see that potential, and believe in them that they can do it? Now we're on our way. Way before we start developing potential, I believe you've got to believe in them and see the opportunity to do that.
So I 100% agree with you. So once we believe in the people, and then we see that people have more potential, more capacity than what we're currently seeing being lived out, then how do we develop the potential?
You know, for me, and I kind of smile because I had this story that I'd heard, and it really, I tell it because it gets people on the idea of the term is next level. Is that, do I believe that for me personally, there's a next level? Can I, do people that I'm working with know that they have a next level? And I guess what I've figured out with most people is they don't even think this way. They think they are where they are, that this is it. And so the story was the guy told a story about going to one of these local carnivals, and they had a mechanical bull, and he was with some neighbors, and the neighbors said, "Hey, it'd be like me saying, Chris, go ahead, get on the bull." He goes, "I'm not getting on the bull." "No, go ahead, get on the bull. This be fun." And there's nobody here. Just get on the bull. And the guy kept rejecting, but then the owner, the operator of the bull said, "Hey, let me tell you, it's going to move it up, but don't hold on too tight. Hold on loosely with a loose grip under the rope, and then just go. It'll if you hold on too tight, when it moves, it'll throw you. But if you hold on right." The guy said, "All right, I'll do it." And he got on, and then the bull rose up, and it started flicking this way and flicking that way. And the guy, as he's telling it, said he got a little confident, and he started putting his other hand above his head and holding with one hand, and it went the 8 seconds, and the buzzer went off, whoop, and he swings his leg off like he's John Wayne and comes walking back over, and he looks over at the operator and says, "Wait, great tip, that was great, thank you very much." And the operator looked at him and said, "That was level 1. You did great. You want to go to the there are 8 levels. You want to go to the next level." And then you see the guy running down the main fair at the carnival, and thinking, "Wow, we always think we're doing pretty good where we are, but do you think about there being a next level?" So for me, the first step was really realizing there is a next level. Can I help people find it, and can I help me find it? Can we help people find that?
Hey, podcast listeners, how would you like to be equipped with the tools to continue your personal growth and refine your strengths and weaknesses, all while being surrounded by other growth-minded leaders like yourself? You may have heard of our International Maxwell Conference, or IMC. It's our biannual event in which Maxwell Leadership Certified Team members come from all around the world to grow and learn together. IMC this August is the first time we're opening the event to the public by kicking the event off with our first ever Personal Growth Day. This is a 1.5-day event on August 29th through 30th in Orlando, Florida, and it's designed to dig deeper into who you are and how you tick so that you can become the best version of yourself. If you are unable to attend Personal Growth Day in person, we also offer virtual access to the event. If you'd like to participate in a one-of-a-kind experience and stand shoulder to shoulder with growing leaders who will sharpen your skills and equip you to create powerful, positive impact in your life, go to maxwellleadership.com/personal growth day to learn more or get your ticket. We'll see you there.
For those of you that are not joining us yet on YouTube, you just missed some of Perry's animations on that story. But I love that, right? Like the first thing that you just talked about is that we need to help them believe in the next level. They first got to kind of believe that. But we need to also make sure that they have buy-in on where you're trying to develop them and where you're trying to take them as a leader.
That's
right?
good.
Like
Ownership of that.
Yeah, like what are their aspirations? And listen, there are going to be people on your team that you are leading that are not going to have the aspirations that you want them to have, or even you see in them. They're just not going to have it. And you've got to make sure that they have the buy-in. But if they do have the buy-in and they do aspire to what you see in them and you believe in them and you talk about how to develop that, if they do have that, then I think what you got to do then as a leader is not only talk about that of what they aspire to be in the capacity they can have, but then identify where they're at and where they can be, like where their potential is and what you see in them. Once you have that conversation, then what we call, is that disappointment gap there in the middle, which is, hey, expectations and reality are X and Y. Now, what's the gap? And so you are, as the leader, have to define what that gap looks like. And then you've got to help them with resources and tools by developing them as what we call kind of to bridge that gap and to close the gap so that they can begin to see some wins, right? A great story. Level 1 on the bull, right? He saw a win.
Yeah.
Was it enough to get him at level 2? No, not enough for that guy. May have not have been enough for me either. But I love that, how he taught him a little bit, developed them, that bridge, that first gap, getting on there. And so as leaders, you have to, again, let me just go back. You need to make sure that they have buy-in. They aspire to grow their capacity and grow their potential. You have to help identify kind of where is reality versus where that aspiration or potential or capacity can be. And then you got to help resource them and develop them with kind of bridging that.
Yeah, I love that. So hearing you describe that way, it really is many leaders don't think about is that some part of your coaching conversation, you can't just jump to the development, the skill, the goal. Some part of that's got to be in understanding what are they capable of, what is their capacity, do they believe in themselves, do they have the potential, do they see the potential, and can you come to agreement with what is it we're really going for here? What is the next level for you? And I'm here to help you get there. And I don't think I ever spent much time. I always kind of jump to the punchline of the coaching. Let's work on this, and they must be shaking their head the whole time, thinking, I can't do that.
Yeah.
What are you, crazy?
Yeah.
But they'll put on a good act, and they don't want to disappoint and those types of things. I think it's a great big great piece of what we do to help people believe that they can do more, and that I believe in you. And I think for me, if I had somebody believing in me, that was a lot of the problem right there. Is that you believe in me?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I could believe in you.
Maybe you
too.
can do it. Yeah.
What are some of the keys to fostering the growth of leaders within your organization?
First of all, I think that, Tom, 90% of leaders never develop leaders. I think they just have followers. And one of the reasons is a lot of leaders don't really want other leaders. Leaders are hard to lead. I mean, it's like herding cats. They just don't naturally fall in line. So I think that, first of all, most people don't really develop leaders. But in developing leaders, there are three things that are just absolutely essential. In the book, The Leader's Greatest Return, I wrote The Leader's Greatest Return because I truly believe that the greatest return a leader ever gets is developing other leaders, because that's when you really begin to compound. And I think there are three essentials always in developing leaders. First of all is your own example. People do what people see. So if I'm going to develop leaders, I have to be a good leader. Maybe the greatest leadership words ever said was follow me. Just follow me. Watch me. Because what Stanford research says that 89% of what we know visually. And so I think, first of all, in developing leaders, you have to model it. The second thing I think in developing leaders is you have to be intentional. I think that you have to commit yourself to finding them, which I talk about in the book, letting them come to the leadership table, discerning what kind of capacity they have. And then I think you have to intentionally have a program of development for them. I think you have to have a process. I think of all the money we spend in companies in marketing and in advertising. And I was speaking one time, this was several years ago, for AT&T. And when I was introduced to their maybe top 300 leaders, I was going to spend an afternoon with them. The guy said something very interesting. he said to them, he said, "You're our most appreciable asset." And of course, that's a wonderful statement there. Everybody loves that. And I came up behind him and I said, "It's true and it's not true." I said, "You're really only an appreciable asset if somebody intentionally develops you and you intentionally develop yourself. We don't automatically get better." And this is a big miss. I think that we think, well, if I just automatically go to work or if I automatically do my job, that I'll just grow. And I had a mentor when I was in my 20s just say, "John, growth is not automatic. Getting older is automatic, but getting better isn't. And there's a world of difference." So I think that you have to be an example, and I think you have to be incredibly intentional in saying, okay, I'm going to have a leadership culture. I'm going to develop leaders. And the third thing I think that is just overlooked consistently in developing leaders is that you've got to empower them. You have got to let them run the ball. Because the only way you learn leadership is by practicing leadership. So I think what a good leader does is she sets the stage for a successful run. You want to get some wins under their belts for them. And I just think that it's an empowering environment where you release people. The problem is leaders will stop and say, "Well, but they don't do it as well as I do it." And so that's not the point. The only way they can ever do it as well as that you do it is for them to do it. And then for you to coach them and come alongside of them and say, okay, here's how you can do that better. And we have a kind of like a 5-step equipping process. I do it, you're with me, you do it, I'm with you, you do it, and then you do it and someone else is with you, and it's a multiplication process there. So I think those three things of the example, the intentionality, and the empowerment, that's I think what develops a leadership culture that really establishes the fact that if you want to learn how to lead, this is a place where you can do that. I say this in the book, by the way, that when I would bring people on the team, I would share with them that I wanted them to work themselves out of a job.
Yeah.
And pretty much I would just say, okay, you've got the job. I want you to do it well. Let me see you do it well. But while you're doing it well, you find somebody to replace you. And that's how that's really how you develop. You talk about a farm team of leaders. And if you can work yourself out of your job, I'll give you another job. Mark Cole, who he and I are owners of the company now, and he's the CEO and president, but he started off in the stockroom 20 years ago.
Whoa. 20
years ago. And I was just asking him recently in a conversation, I said, how many jobs did you work your way out of to get where you are? He said 9.
Wow.
9 times. And I tell people, first of all, I can't promote you unless you got somebody to replace you. So the first part of promotion isn't just getting better till I want to bring you up. First part of promotion is to show me some person that we're not going to have a big loss if I do bring you up. And 9 times he worked himself out of a job, found somebody else and said, okay, come on up, until one day he's where he is.
Not bad. That's very impressive.
But I would love to, on the topic of habits, just kind of ask you for a little bit of insider's tip, because you have such a unique role with John, with your proximity with John. Is there anything, if you could talk about a habit or maybe two that you have developed or that you've seen because of your proximity to John, that has so greatly affected your life that maybe you could share with all of us that we haven't experienced? I mean, John is very open in what he's an open book. He teaches everything that he does. But is there anything that has impacted you, that has impacted your life as a result of your proximity that you could share with us?
Yeah, and I think it started with a discipline for John, and then now it's worked itself into a habit. In other words, something tangible he can do to make sure he keeps the discipline in front. And the discipline is not to take himself too seriously. In other words, and again, we're still talking about the habit of doing things failures don't like to do, people that have a failure mindset rather than a winning mindset. And one of the things I love about John that I have learned, and I work hard to apply this in my life, is John will take a disappointment, a discouragement, a less than satisfactory result, and John will look at it and go, wow, I'm going to take 24 hours and I'm going to debrief that, and I'm going to see what I can learn. But he never makes it personal because he doesn't take himself too seriously. He always is committed to being his best version. And if that comes up short, find a way to learn so he can be a better version tomorrow. And he does the same thing with success. He doesn't take himself too seriously with success. I mean, he's written 86 different books, 119 derivatives of books, and has 36 million pair of hands that's held his book. Yet, as you've said, Tracy, he never lets that get to his head and let him feel elevated about himself. One of his greatest illustrations on that is when he walks off the stage and gets a standing ovation, which happens quite often. He always goes, John, they're applauding the gift. They're not applauding you. So get yourself off the stage. Let yourself go about your business, because that's about the gift. It's not about you. And gifts can be taken as quickly as they can be given. And when John does that, that's a discipline, by the way. That's a habit. When people try to elevate him to superstar status, John always
Super
brings
sauce
himself.
works too.
Yes, exactly.
Super
exactly.
sauce.
Superstar status, then John always has the discipline of going, they're not applauding for you. When something bad happens, he goes, John, you're not that bad. It's a discipline to self-talk himself to keep that winning mindset and to make a habit out of it.
I love that, because we did not talk about that beforehand, but it leads right into number 5. And that is the Ralph Waldo Emerson quote, what lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us, because that's really what you're talking about and what John really embodies. It's not about circumstances. It's being settled inside of who you are. It's not whether they're applauding you or whether they're throwing eggs at you. It's knowing who you are and what your purpose is. And that is a winner's mindset. And so I believe that we as leaders, I know I'm certainly tempted to lean into my circumstances and letting them believe that they have more power over the outcome and my attitude, maybe.
The next lesson I want to teach on leader shifting is shifting from directing to connecting. And I call this the communication shift, okay? And I love this lesson too, because I think that if I can help you leader shift in this area, it's going to be pretty amazing how much you're going to grow and how much you're going to develop. So let's talk about this. First of all, this was not a natural shift for me. In fact, of the shifts that I talk about in leader shifts, almost all of them were not natural. The difference between directing and connecting, let me compare it for a moment. Directing is kind of authoritative, where connecting is collaborative. It's a different mindset. Do I want to come across as an authority with you, or do I want to come across as a person that wants to collaborate with you? Directing is all talking, whereas connecting is quite a bit of listening. Directing is top down, connecting is side by side. When you direct people, you enlist them. When you connect the people, you empower them. Direction is more assuming. Connecting is more understanding. Directing gives answers. Connecting asks questions. Okay? Directing's more my agenda. Connecting's more your agenda. When I direct, I'm standing on my ground. When I connect, I'm going to your ground. And this is a great leader shift to make in your leadership. I think directing is mostly all about me, and I think connecting is a lot more about you. So how do we find common ground? So if we're going to be connecting with people, we got to find common ground with them. That's where it starts. My goal is always to find common ground with you. So how do I do that? What's needed to find common ground? Number one, humility. And when I speak of humility, let me say it in this context. Let people know that you need them. There's something very connecting when you go up to people and say, I need you. Especially when it comes from a leader. And by the way, in the beginning, because I was directional, I was exactly opposite. I never expressed to the people that I needed them. You know what I thought? I thought they needed me. Back then it wasn't, my name is John and I'm your friend. Back then my name is John and I'm Superman. And I'm just going to fly in and land right among you. And, wow, I'm here, and be healed and be whole, and, the whole process, and, just kind of make everybody go to a higher level. And that, let me tell you something. That worked until God gave me a bigger dream. Now, here's what happens. When God gives you a dream that is bigger than you have two choices. You can either become overwhelmed and give up, and that's a possibility, okay? You can just say, oh my gosh, this is way bigger than me. I got to give up. So you can so the choice are, I can either give up or I can get help. One of the two. And when the dream becomes big, all of a sudden, giving up wasn't the option. So I said, I've got to get help. I've got to have people help me. So when somebody comes and tells me that they're the phrase, I'm a self-made man, when everybody tells me they're a self-made man, I always look at them and say, oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, that's so terrible. Oh, it's not the reaction they're expecting. But what I'm saying is, if you've made everything yourself, you haven't made much. One is too small of a number to achieve greatness. And so today, when I look at what I see as my dream and my vision, my first response is, I need you. I gotta have people. I've got to have more people. And in the next few years, I need thousands of transformational trainers. Not hundreds. I mean, I need thousands. You say, how many thousand? I don't know. Maybe 20, 25,000. Transformational trainers. Now, I'm just stopping here for a moment. I'm sowing seed right now into you. I need you. I need you. I need every one of you to say, boy, I'd like to be a part of transformation. I'd like to be a transformational trainer. Now, it's not for me to talk about that right now. I'm just casting the vision, but I just want you to know that for what I want to accomplish, I don't need 10, I don't need 100, I don't need like 500. I need thousands of them. And I happen to believe that God will give them to me. I think thousands will, once they see the challenge and once we get the vision out there, and that's not for today, but it's going to happen very soon. And I think there's a whole bunch of people say, sign me up. I want to be a transformational trainer, of which if you do that really good, you'll graduate and become a transformational leader. Oh yeah, we're getting it ready. We're getting ready. You don't even know what it's all about, but are you excited about it? Huh? I mean, would you like? This is just mundane question for average people, but the right question for people like you. Would you just like to be a part of something a lot bigger than yourself that really changed lives and made a difference? But to do that, I need help. So there's a sense of humility in this process of making this leader shift. The second thing is if you're going to really connect with people, it's curiosity, number two, and that is consistently asking people questions. The difference between my leadership in my 30s and my leadership now is that I lead by asking questions. I used to lead by directing. Now I lead by asking questions. Again, I try to find them before I can lead them. I wrote a book a few years ago, Good Leaders Ask Great Questions. Wow. Because they do. So number three. If you want to go from directing to connecting, number three, it takes effort. In other words, you've got to go out of your way to connect with people. If you're going to go find them on their ground, it takes a lot of energy and effort to do that. See, the connection question is, who moves first? And the answer is, the connector moves first. You don't wait for the other person to come to you. You start going to them immediately. So when somebody tells me, when somebody says, John, it's lonely at the top, they're not a connector. Now, why is it lonely at the top? Because they didn't take anybody at the top with them. And why are they at the top all alone? You need to get off the top and go down to where the people are and bring them to the top with you. And that takes energy, that takes effort, that takes us leaving our position to go there and find the people and connect with them. So there's a tremendous amount of effort in that process too. Number 4, to connect well, trustworthiness is essential. And to be a trustworthy leader is to be someone that people can count on. Maybe the greatest expression of your leadership, maybe, is when somebody comes and says, I can count on you. To have a leader that you can count on. And trustworthy doesn't mean you're perfect, okay? We got to make sure we got that right. I don't think people want a perfect leader. I think they want an authentic leader. An authentic leader isn't perfect, but an authentic leader admits to the weaknesses and the problems and does their best to fix them. They're very open. They're very transparent. And trustworthiness means that I can count on you. I can count on you. Number 5 is generosity. Just be a generous person. Be the first to give. Be the first to care. Be the first to connect. Generosity is living outside of yourself. The success of my day is based on the seeds I sow, not the harvest I reap. 98% of the people, the success of their day is by the harvest that they reap. Become a seed sower. Don't worry about the harvest. Can I tell you something? The harvest will take care of itself. Don't worry about the harvest. You just sow seeds every day. My entire life, I've just sowed seeds, what I found is it's become huge in my life. It's now I'm reaping this incredible harvest, and I'm still just sowing seeds. I mean, just if you'll just sow seeds all your life, don't worry, your harvest will be pretty big. Number 6, if you want to connect with people, listening. The best way to find common ground is by being a listener. I love what Andy Stanley says. He said, leaders who don't listen will eventually be surrounded by people who have nothing to say. Isn't that powerful? They'll eventually be surrounded by people who have nothing to say. And the last connecting link, to go from a directing person to a connecting person, the last link is encouragement, which gives people oxygen for their soul. That's what encouragement is. Just breathe into their soul by lifting them up, by encouraging them, by believing in them. My father is a great encourager. And I asked him one time, I said, Dad, how do you know people need to be encouraged? He said, oh, son, that's simple. If they're breathing, they need to be encouraged. He said, now, son, if they're not breathing, don't waste your time. But if they're breathing, they need to be encouraged. And he was such a phenomenal example of that, of just encouraging people. And I just want you to know, when you connect people, well, let me just do a little survey. How many of you like to be encouraged? Okay. We do. We all like to be encouraged. There's something about it. When somebody's going to come, when somebody's encouraged you, when you see them coming, it just fills your heart with hope, doesn't it? And aren't there other people, when you see them walk into the room, you say, oh, God, keep them away from me. You know, the closer they get to you, the more they suck life right out of you. Okay? Be an encourager. When you do that, when you encourage people, you become a great connector in life.
The more we grow, the more we know we need to grow. In other words, when you start growing and developing yourself, the first thing you're going to find is that instead of feeling like you know more and you've kind of arrived, the more you learn and the more you know, the less you feel you've arrived. In fact, you know what I have found? The only people who think they're arrived are people that don't know much. Alvin Toffler in Future Shock once observed, the illiterate of the future are not those who cannot read or write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. Abraham Lincoln said, "I don't think much of a man who is not wiser today than he was yesterday." This is not in your notes, but Andy Rooney on 60 Minutes, he said, "When I got to college, I looked back on what I had done with such pride in high school and wondered how I could have been so young. When I went to work for a newspaper and started cleaning out boxes of things I'd written for the college newspaper, I burned them hastily so no one would ever know how bad I had been as a writer. Over the years, whenever I've looked back on things that I wrote in the past, they seem, how shall I say, not so good. That's okay for high school, college, and early newspaper pieces I wrote. But now I notice, as I look back on things I wrote last week and decide that this week I'm finally growing up and writing better, what am I going to think of this next week?" What was he saying? It's very simple. The more I grow, the more I know I don't know. Here's the way this works. The more we grow, the more we know, and the more that we grow, the more we know that we need to grow some more. That's exactly the way it works. When I think about this statement, I'm reminded of the little girl who thought that she had exhausted mathematics when she had learned the 12 times table. Remember when you had to learn the 12 times table? She got through the whole 12 times table with a little twinkle in his eye. Her grandfather said, "Well, now that you know all the numbers up through 12, he says, what does 13 times 13? And she said, "Oh, don't be silly, Grandpa. There's no such thing." There are 4 different development levels that people go through as they move from dependence to independence. And each of these stages demonstrate a different combination of competence and commitment. For example, number 1, enthusiastic beginner. This is where they start. This is the first level of development. This person is excited about doing something, but has little knowledge about how to proceed. You see that all the time, don't you? Oh, they're so excited. They don't have a clue, but they're excited. Never allow enthusiasm to replace discipline or a plan. One of the weaknesses I see in people is they put way too much of a high priority on enthusiasm and way too little priority on a disciplined plan. In other words, when you get done being excited and your feet touch the ground, I have one question for you. After your hip, hip, hooray and hype, what you going to do to get to the next level? Number 2. Usually in the phases, you go from enthusiastic beginner to number 2, which is disillusioned learner. In other words, soon after beginning a new task, an individual commonly experiences reality shock. The difference between what they expected and the reality of the situation. While a disillusioned learner knows more than when he started a job, goal, or task, the excitement and enthusiasm has decreased. We've all seen that, where they get excited and they start learning, and they think, oh my goodness, I'm never going to get there. Level 3, or stage 3, is capable but cautious performer. Capable but cautious performer. Most individuals enter a stage of self-doubt and become a capable but cautious performer. They know how to do the task but are nervous about doing it on their own. Let me just say something about this level, just a statement. Stay with them until they have knowledge and confidence. They need more than knowledge, they need confidence. Stay with them long enough that they not only know what to do, but they feel confident in doing it. Number 4, the 4th stage, is self-reliant achiever. This is a person now that becomes a peak performer. With proper support, an individual can eventually reach this stage and be able to perform the task independently. Diagnosing your level of development will help you to develop a plan to reach peak performance on any job, skill, or goal. That's some good stuff from Ken Blanchard. John Wooden said it this way, and I love this statement. He said, "It's what you learn after you know it all that counts." I looked at that statement. It's what you learn after you know it all that counts. And I asked myself, well, what are the characteristics of people who learn after they know it all? Because don't we all know people that they know it all and they never learn another thing the rest of their life? Well, what are the characteristics of a person who learns after they know it all? These are quick and simple. One is humility. That's a fact. You have to be humble. Number 2 is security. You have to be secure. You have to be willing, even no matter what your position is, to say, I don't know it all yet. Number 3, you have to be willing to change. There has to be a willingness to change in your life or my life. Number 4 is good listening skills. And number 5, continually being growth conscious. Because see, if you're growth conscious instead of goal conscious, you will keep learning after you know it all.
Well, today's topic is titled An Intentional Leader's Guide to Influence. And if you want to become someone who can positively influence other people, you really need to develop qualities around that, qualities of integrity, and then live them out every day. And make sure, you know, the way that you are leading, the way that you are talking is how you're living that out. And the key here is those don't happen by accident. They're learned. You may have an intrinsic, maybe some core to some of those competences or qualities, but you really got to live them out. You got to develop them. And in order to do that, it takes intentionality. And so, Perry, just talk to us a little bit about the title today and where we're going on this content.
Yeah, so we have a piece of content based on a book that John wrote some years ago called Developing the Leader Within You. And, of course, we believe leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. So you're really developing the influence that you have with others. I was doing on a group call around this topic of developing the leader within you and noticed that the idea of what is influence, how do you gain it, how do people see you as a person of influence, how does that happen? And it really is this word intentional. There are intentional things we need to do. We have a couple other podcasts where we've talked about some practical ways to build influence. I really like this lesson on looking at some really the mindset. I love John's the leader within you. Is that how do you develop these attributes in you?
Love it. Well, when John teaches the intentionality of influence, he shares a handful of ideas that can make your intentional efforts pay off. And so Perry and I are just going to kind of bounce back and forth with a couple of these ideas and share them with you as we get started. The first one is model consistency of character. I think when you do this, it builds trust, which we talk about, you know, trust being the currency to all influence and leadership. I think you create a stable environment as a leader. And you may say, well, how do I go about doing this? Which is a fair question. But I think as leaders then, if you have, you know, clear values and principles, reliable decision-making. I can think back to some leaders that I've had where their decision-making was not reliable. Not saying it's here, but previously that has been the case. I think if you have emotional stability, we talk about EQ a lot as leaders. And just remember that as we talk about this consistency of character, consistency doesn't necessarily mean that it's just rigid. It's really about having stability, reliability, and trustworthiness that allows you to be able to do that.
I love that. No key word is consistency of character. Yeah. You know, we work with a lot of leaders, and I don't know that I have one that I think is trying not to uphold the highest character.
Right.
We tend to, if you're
That's
in leadership, good. You are tending to. You're not trying to deceive or hurt. You're trying to uphold the highest of character. What I have noticed, though, when it comes to consistency, and this is true. This was true for me for a number of years. Was, are you the same person? Are you the same character in every situation you're in? At home, at work, on the golf course, at the gym, in the workplace, at the church, in the neighborhood. Yeah. Are you the same person? And I know, just speaking from my past, it was I can be 2 different people, 3 different people, depending on who I'm with. That is not consistency of character. Yeah. And so one of the big learnings I had to make was determine who you are. What is the character you want to live to? And then be that. And don't apologize for it. Don't protect, this group from it and not that group. Are you consistent in how you walk things out? And is your talk consistent in every constituency that you're hanging with?
We do this values card exercise, and you just made me think about 8 out of 10 times they're like, now, are we doing this for the values here at work or at home?
Yeah.
And we're like, it shouldn't
you
be.
have different values?
You have different values. And so it just made me think about that. And so getting into the place where you're consistent no matter where you are, I think is key.
And number 2 is another one you think, well, yeah, but I want to hear what you think about this, though. It says, employ honest communication. Employ honest communication. I thought, well, I don't know a lot of people that are trying to be dishonest about their communication, but this is not what we're talking about here. You think about a person of influence, has that consistency of character. They speak in a way that is very clear. That is, we talk about clear as kind. They don't shield you from stuff. They don't protect you. They don't give you just what you need to know. They don't hold back. They are very honest, open, and consistent again in their communication. And you can generally tell that when they're talking, you're getting the straight scoop.
Yeah.
There's nothing you have to read between the lines. You don't have to figure out what did they mean, no innuendo, those types of things. It is developing an honesty of my communication, direct.
I think different levels of leadership, at times as leaders, you will have communication that you can't share at the moment. However, if that's the case, be honest about that, right? Like to your point, they can sense that. You and I can sense it. Everybody that's listening can sense it when someone's communicating to them and they're like, I don't think I'm getting the whole story. Like there's something behind there. And so I love that as being the next one that you brought up. Well, the third one is value transparency. Speaking of communication, feeding right off what you just talked about, man, be open and honest with your communication. Encourage feedback both ways. Be transparent with what you're thinking. Allow your team and those that you influence to do the same thing. Address mistakes and failures. I put this one down there because, everybody knows when you make a mistake. And there's failures. It's okay to be transparent about it, and encourage that in your team and lead by example by doing that. In order for you to really kind of get to this valuing transparency, it is an ongoing effort that requires commitment to be able to do it. Because naturally, I think we as human beings in our flesh don't necessarily want to do this, right? We want to look all buttoned up and thinking about maybe in the past, walking out of my house as a kid, my mom's like, now, everybody put your smiles on. We don't talk about what just happened inside the house, right? And we should value transparency, not necessarily that.
I love your direction on a bit about vulnerability is that don't hide your mistakes and faults. That it leads to you looking perfect, and nobody really likes perfect. You're much more relatable if you're real, and you value that transparency. Often the example I give when I teach about this is that we tend to, and social media does this a lot. You're seeing the Perry front stage act, and there's a curtain drawn behind me, and all you can see is what I want you to see. The transparency of my life is I open the curtain, and you see the backstage act, which can be a little bit disastrous, chaotic, out of control sometimes. But it begins to give you a realization of my whole story. Now, this doesn't mean all my dirty laundry's out. No, but there's too much information. But I don't mind sharing with my life to say I don't have it all together. I'm learning, and you can help me, and we can help each other. So the transparency, I think, adds to connection and trust.
That's good.
Is really that for that. This one kind of leads into this next one, exemplify humility. Are you an example of humility in your work? Do people see you as humble? And I love in Tim Elmore's book, The 8 Paradoxes of Leadership, paradox number 1 fascinated me because it said, can you be confident and humble at the same time? I thought, well, I really want to be a confident leader. We all want to be confident. But if I have that and no humility, I'm arrogant. Well, what if I'm all humble and no confidence? Then I'm kind of sheepishness or something. I don't know. You don't want that either. So can I balance confidence and humility? And how do you do that? And a lot of times it's what you just said. It's about being a little more transparent, using the 3 most unused words in leadership. I don't know. Letting people know that you need them, admitting that you made a mistake, asking for help, asking for an opinion, asking for a point of view. All kinds of things that can open the door to humility.
I know we've talked about those 3 words before. I don't know. I was thinking when you just said that completely went out of my mind. And I thought, I am sorry. That's probably those. But like even just thinking about where you're at with humility, and because if my wife is listening, she'd be like, that's absolutely 3 words that Chris doesn't say enough, right? And so I didn't even think about that.
That's
You just
really
said
good.
that came to my mind because I think that shows humility. I was also thinking about, we work with leaders all the time on the 5 levels of leadership, and we talk about, you build your way up the levels, you never leave the level behind, but the other person gets to determine what level of influence you have with them. And so sometimes when we're talking about this with teams, to make an example, I'll walk up and I'll be like, you don't go up to a new team member that you have level 1 influence with and go, "Hi, my name's Chris Godey. Welcome to the team. I'm a level 5 leader. We're going to kill it," right? Like they go, "This dude's an idiot and I'm out of here." Right. And there's no humility in that in regards to your influence. And
You really have grown in that too, by the
well,
way.
thank you. I appreciate that. It's taken 27 years. No, I'm just kidding. Well, the next one that I want to bring to your attention here is demonstrate your support for others. I think when you do this as a leader, you foster a positive, a productive environment in the team, and in that individual, it helps empower them. How do you go about doing this? Man, you've got to be an active listener. We hear this a lot as well. I think communication is always a competency we hear about when we're working with teams, but we also hear that, man, he or she just doesn't listen. And I think if we can really become good active listeners, I think we'll have support for other people. I think the other thing around this is I try to view my leadership or my influence as removing obstacles and barriers for people in order to support what they're there to do, what they're called to do, what they're gifted to do. And I think when you do that, then it demonstrates that you're supporting others on that team, and it will be it'll help your influence with them.
Yeah, key word for me there is others, and you just gave a great example. You are good at this, removing obstacles, barriers, clearing the way for the team to be effective, and that is an others-oriented mindset. And this demonstrating support for others, not trying to get others to demonstrate their support for you. Yeah. And so I want to move away from a self-centered mindset to an others orientation. And when leaders have an others orientation, people know it. And when we talk about, do the people on your team know you're for them, or are you looking for something from them? And I thought, if I'm demonstrating support for you, I have my antennae up looking to say, what do you need? What's in the way? What are the barriers? This is what you're so great at, saying, who do I need? I think you helped me yesterday. I had a question, wasn't trying to give you an assignment, but you said, no, I can get that real quick. And I said, no, I got it. This should be not an obstacle. This should be out of the way for everybody. So let me do that. That's an others-oriented mentality, and it really demonstrated your support for me, and you do that really well. Another one was about, seems simple, fulfill your promises. But and I'm going to tell you what I've learned about this recently was it's generally not the big, hairy, audacious promise that you say, I'm going to, like you just did yesterday, let me get that out of your way for you. It would have been easy for you to, I'll do that later. It's so simple, so easy. But you didn't. You took care of it right in the moment, and you fulfilled your promise. What I've learned about me is that one way I can break trust with others and lose influence is I'm on a call. Somebody says, man, I love that chart. Could you send me that chart? Of course, it's a no-brainer. I just say no-brainer. Yeah, glad to. And then a call ends, and then what I do, I go to the next call or move on to the next thing, and I don't do it. And while to me it's a tiny little chart, it's a chart. To them, it was a promise made that they are tracking viciously to say, Perry never sent me that. Yeah. I have to ask 3 times. Every time I want something from Perry, I said, you know what? I'm changing. Got a little multicolored pen I see you're using. It was, if I make a commitment, I make a promise in a call, in a face-to-face, in a conference room, I change colors of my pen and I write in my notes.
That's great.
In red, I just made a commitment. So I write that in. So at the end of the day or at the lunch break or whatever I do, I look at anything in red.
That's really good.
I need to fulfill that because that is looking like a promise to other people. And it seems so small to me, I just overlooked it. But it's not small to them. And if you want to continue to have influence and trust, do the small things really well.
Yeah, I love that you developed a system and a process to help yourself with that, because we all get busy and we do make promises and then just accidentally it just falls through the crack and we forget about it. So I love that you have a system that you have set up to be able to do that. The other thing I was thinking about when you were talking about this is making sure that we don't say yes to everything, because I have a bad habit to do that. We talk about being a recovering people pleaser. And so
be careful what you promise.
Yeah. And so, if it's something that maybe you're not going to have time for in the moment, I'd rather you say, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do that, or no, I can't do that, versus saying yes and then not doing it, to your point. Not saying you would say no to somebody that asked for a chart, but I know that sometimes I'm like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that gets me in trouble because then I don't fulfill those promises. So,
same thing.
Well, number 7, embrace an attitude of service. This what jumps out to me here is you're just really focusing on others. Mm-hmm. Again, going to another content piece that you've helped develop with us, which is Ascend to Servant Leadership. And that's really what it's all about. And it's not subservient, right? It's about having the focus on others. Talk just a little bit about just that course and the impact that it's had on you and some of the key points developed out of that. Because I think that's another great day of training for teams that really helps them with servant leadership.
Yeah, people say, I like the idea of servant leadership, but could you call it something else because it seems weak? Yeah. And I just tell them it is the hardest thing you've ever done. It is becoming a warrior for your people. Mm-hmm. It is having this, as it says here, an attitude of service that when I look at my team, and matter of fact, influence, we didn't mention this a lot, but influence is 360. It's up, down, and across. So it's not just down to your team. It's across to your peers. It's up to your leader, to your supervisor. So how are you having an attitude of service and putting yourself in a servant leader mindset to really serve the needs? How do I lighten the load of my leader? How do I assist and grow the people next to me? How do I remove barriers and serve the people on my team so that they have success? It really is a 360-degree attitude of service that does that. And it's the hardest thing you've ever done.
Hard.
People say, it seems kind of weak. It's not weak. It's complete struggle.
Yeah. Simple but hard.
Yeah. The last one we'll put on the table was encouraging two-way communication with the people you hope to influence. I love adding this one because the higher you go in leadership, the more it seems to be my voice only. And so I love this idea of share of voice and inviting people to have a point of view, inviting my team to speak. John using phrases like, all of us is smarter than one of us, and we're not going to be successful unless everybody wants me to be. I need to have people speaking in. And am I tapping into, well, first of all, the diversity? We talk about that. Am I being inclusive of this diverse team I've put together so that we have the best chance of getting the best ideas, not just my ideas. I see one way, and I don't need you thinking like me. I need you thinking like you. So inviting that voice into what we do.
I love that. I think that all of these things that we just talked about today, you're probably going, that's not earth-shattering. Well, we know that. I think the real question is kind of bringing those to light and just asking yourself, are we doing them? Are we living this out? And I think Perry and I shared as we went through a couple of these that, man, it's even hard for us to do that at times, and we let things go. And so just bringing them to kind of the forefront of your mind again, saying, hey, this is how you grow your influence. If you're intentional about these things, that it will happen. The key word there is intentional, because we've talked about our calendars and we've talked about our to-dos and all those things, and teaching classes, and yes, making promises and then not delivering. But man, how are we intentional about that? What is the system and the process that we've set up as leaders to be able to increase and grow our influence through doing that?
And I did that little exercise you just suggested. Take those 8, look at them, be honest with yourself. And I already mentioned fulfill promises. I had to do a realignment on, am I keeping the small promises I'm making? Of course, the big ones too, but especially I struggle with the small ones. I wrote down demonstrating my support for others. Sometimes I get a little bit too into myself and into what I'm doing, into what my to-do list is. I'm not looking around about how I can help the team, and that led to embracing an attitude of service. Am I actually actively, intentionally looking for ways to serve my leader, my peers, and my team to do that? So it's a great little exercise. Got to be honest. It could be a little hurtful, but you can grow from it.
Yeah, great self-awareness to go through these and ask yourself those questions.
You just wrote a book called The Leader's Greatest Return. Yeah. And in there, we talk about developing leaders, really the level 4 influence in the 5 levels of leadership that we talk about so often. One of the things that we see in organizations that we help all around the world is this lack of leadership bench, the lack of succession planning when it comes to leaders. Talk about the importance of developing leaders, building succession plans in organizations in order for the organizations to really be scalable and sustainable beyond the leader.
Well, the depth of an organization is based on how many players you have that can really produce. I love college football. You love college football.
Yeah.
In fact,
Chris has a son that's at University of Georgia. It's a tight end, an incredible football player. You know the difference between University of Georgia football and a small college football is the depth. If you go to the second team, you go all the way down the line, all of those players, they're good players. In fact, when they move players in and out, it really doesn't make much of a difference in the game because there's a depth, there's a quality there. And why is that? Well, one is they have gifts and talents. And so when you recruit people, I tell people, I wrote a book one time called Talent is Never Enough. I've kind of always thought I ought to write another book, a sequel to that book. Talent is never enough, but it would be good to have some. Because, if you're a coach with a track and field team and you got to have a high jumper, you don't need 7 people who can jump 1 foot. You need 1 person who can jump 7 feet. And so so when you're recruiting in your company, obviously the talent that you attract to yourself is very important. But let me say something about depth and attraction and recruiting. It's also true, and the reason we try to develop leaders so much is because we attract who we are, not who we want. That's the law of magnetism, the 21 laws of leadership. And Chris, what that means is we are so much in training and developing people because we know the better we develop your people, the better people they attract in their recruiting. And that is so essential for the depth of the team, for the longevity of the team. And it's wonderful. I mean, a quarterback doesn't get paid to run the ball. A quarterback gets paid to put the ball in the hands of the right person, whether it's a pass or it's a handoff. They get paid by knowing who to hand the ball off to. So the key of a successful team is to have people that can catch the ball and can run the ball. And the more that you train them and develop, let me just say one more thing about this, because this is huge. Okay. We talk about people being our most appreciable asset.
Yes.
And in fact, as I'm talking to you, I'll bet every one of you right now, as you're kind of watching me, if I said the people in your company are your most appreciable asset, every one of you would say, check, that's exactly right. Because it's true. I mean, the buildings you build, once you build them, they're built. It's the only thing that has potential of improvement is people. The human resources. Now, what's interesting to me is we'll say the most appreciable asset we have in an organization is people, and then we won't invest in people. We won't give the time in mentoring and training and bringing. I mean, if the most important asset in my company is the people, then I ought to be investing my time, my energy, my efforts, my plans. I ought to be investing in my people to make them even more appreciable. Which, what does that do? It then gives you, again, that depth that you're talking about in the team.
So building right off of that, a lot of organizations, a lot of leaders, when you begin to think about investing in your people, they say, hey, let's talk about the return on investment that I'm going to get for investing in my people. And while the easiest way to measure that, right, maybe is at that bottom line, the dollar and cents you can count to the penny. But where you can't measure it and where it shows up really is in the cubicles, in the creative thought process, in the things where they're innovating and all this kind of stuff. Talk a little bit about the leader perspective in organizations and the return on investment that they get for developing and adding value to their team members.
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked that because I hear that too.
Yeah,
I hear that. Yeah. Sometimes it makes me mad and sometimes it amuses me because here's what I know. It's incredibly short-sighted. It's like I had a person one time say to me, well, let me tell you why I don't do a lot in training programs and development of people. He said, you find somebody like Chris and you pour into them and you train them and you invest money in them and they get good and then they leave. And they looked at me and said, what could be worse than pouring money into somebody on your team and they get better and then they leave you? And I said, well, I can tell you what's worse, not pouring money into them and having them stay. Yeah. I mean, I can tell you what's worse than losing somebody that's good, and that's keeping somebody that's bad. And so I think when we begin to say, what's my bottom line? Okay, if you really want to real quickly increase your bottom line, cut expenses. Just cut expenses. Go find a program and cut it out. If you want to increase your bottom line, I mean, you can do that in a moment. By the way, the day you cut expenses, you begin to increase your bottom line. Now, let me ask you a question. Who did you ever know in a company that cut their expenses to the top? how did you become a great company? Well, we just kept cutting expenses. We just have less and less and less, and now there's just me. Well, you can't cut your expenses. You got to increase your investment in the right people in the right places to really build a company. And if people are the appreciable asset, I always say, put your money where your return is. Where is your return? Is your return in your buildings? No. Is your return in your systems? Perhaps. But I know this, it's the people in the systems, it's the people in the culture that make the company. So you better put your money right there.
You know, that made me think about a couple of things in regards to developing people. We say often in our organization as we're working with companies around the world, people will join your team for one reason,
yes,
but they're not going to stay for that same reason. So what are you continually doing to add value and develop the people? And I think the other thing you see there is that your people are your differentiator. You may have competitors. You may have people that do the same thing, but how you value your people, how you invest in your people, just like you said, creates that culture of engagement. Everything we're talking about here today, the engagement level, it breaks down silos, it increases communication, increases collaboration. Talk just a little bit about the importance of that culture and the process of building that culture, right? Law of the process, 21 laws.
Yeah.
It's just not about an event. Talk about that whole process of building that culture over time. And it really feeds into everything we're talking about today, from becoming a leader to developing leaders to that culture that we build.
No doubt, Chris. Well, I think all of us understand the value of culture. I mean, we all have heard the expression, culture eats vision for lunch. And it does. I mean, vision's very important. But remember, vision is all about where you're going, but culture is all about what you're doing. And I learned a long time ago, what you're doing determines where you're going. I've never seen a picture that was so compelling that you got there without behavior. I've never seen a picture that was so incredible. This is the mountain we're going to take. By the way, we don't have to be mountain climbers. We'll get to it because we see that picture real clearly. No. You get to the top of that mountain because you have a culture of behavior that teaches people how to climb a mountain. So when people look at culture, they have to understand that that's going to determine the success of the organization. And because it deals with people, when you deal with people, the good news is that's where your appreciable asset is. The bad news is it's a process. People don't get better immediately. Leaders develop daily, not in a day. And so that's why I tell people, for example, in training, if you use your programs of training as a program, okay, it's good, but it's not the best way. You ought to have a culture of training. In other words, you ought to say, if you come into this organization, one of the things we are going to do is we're going to invest in you to make you a better person, make you a better family member, make you a better communicator, and to make a better community person. We're going to make you a better member of our team and our company. And we all look at people, and when we start to invest in them and train them, and we just say, well, I think it would be easier to do it myself. And it is easier to do it yourself. And it's quicker to do it yourself. It's just not smart because you're going to be doing it yourself. It's like I talk about delegation. I say, if you delegate tasks, all you'll ever do in your organization is develop followers. Here's the task. Chris goes, does it, brings it back. Okay, here's another task. And after a while, honestly, I don't mean this to be depreciated. It's almost like playing fetch with a dog.
Yeah.
You got the ball and you throw it out. What's the dog? Brings it back. Tail's wagging, you throw it
again.
Can I tell you? That dog will wear you out. You just keep throwing. That dog keeps fetching. And let me tell you, and by the way, every time it comes back with a ball with a little slobber on it.
Yes.
If you want to develop leaders, you have to delegate authority. And to delegate authority means that you have to give them more time. You not only have to tell them what the decision is, you have to tell them why you made the decision. And the moment that I give my commitment to the process of people time to get that return, you see what happens with people is in the beginning of your investment, it's a very slow return. But it compounds. Developing people, that consistency and that time compounds. So what happens is that in the beginning, your return is less than your money. To be honest with you, in the end, your return of money is much greater than what your investment was, because that's just the way it works.
Yeah.
People say, John, how have you written 85, 86 books? Well, I have my 5 things, my everyday essentials. Every day I read, every day I read, every day I think, every day I file, every day I ask questions, every day I write. Every day. And people say, well, John, when you say every day, what do you mean by every day? Well, I'm glad you asked that question. I mean every day. Every day. I write every day. You say, John, when you're on vacation, every day when I'm on vacation, I write. Hey, how about Christmas? I write on every Christmas day. And now listen to me carefully. I haven't said I write all day. I said I write every day. Consistency always trumps intensity. Never forget this. I know a whole bunch of people, they'll get intense and they'll just work hard for 4 or 5 days, 10, 12 hours a day, boy, and then they quit. They'd have been much better to just take that axe and 5 times, chop away at that, just every day. So what you need to do is you need to have these everyday essentials. You need to have this clock that reminds you that legacy is built one day at a time. One day. So don't despise the day. Utilize that day. Well, let me give you another picture that really helps you with legacy, helps me at least. The second picture is a picture of a compass. Now, when you have the clock and you have that picture, the clock basically says, what are you doing now? But when you have a compass, the question the compass asks is, where are you going? Because when you think of a compass, people have, why do they have a compass? For direction, to know exactly which path that they should take. When it comes to legacy, the statement is that people will describe your life in one sentence. And then, since people are going to describe your life in one sentence, pick it now. You see what's amazing? When I see that compass, it reminds me that I need to be going in the right direction. And what I need to do is I need to be picking now what I want to have people say, at my memorial service. You don't want to die and then have people show up and they're trying to guess what you accomplished in your life. For me, my compass, my mission, my path that I take basically can be summed up in one sentence, and that is I want to add value to leaders who multiply value to others. That's who I am. That's what I do. That's what I'm committed. That's me. Wow. I think it's very essential for you and me to have what I call, or what Simon Sinek calls, I love that. He said, everybody needs to have a just cause. And a just cause it's about the future. It's about the future. And it's about who you are. It's the compass that, this is where I'm going with my life. I committed my life to teach values because I believe that it's values that brings transformation to people's lives. And so I wrote a book called Change Your World, and it's all about how do I take good values and around a table share and relate and connect with and add value to people to become people of values. You see, a just cause. Simon Sinek talks about that in his wonderful book, The Infinite Game. And a just cause stands for something. It's a positive just cause. It's affirmative and optimistic. What I've discovered is if you're mad at something and you don't like something, that anger gives you great passion, but that passion doesn't last. People that have a negative reason for their cause or passion seldom stay in the game very long because it emotionally wears them down. So a just cause is something that I just absolutely believe in that's got a sense of positivity to it. A just cause must be inclusive. It must be open to everybody. In fact, when we talk about our John Maxwell team and becoming a Maxwell certified leader, my gosh, we say we want you all to come. We want the diversity. We want different people. We want you to fill in the gaps and make a difference and complete us and complement us. A just cause is service oriented. It's always for the benefit of someone else. You see, there's a difference between me wanting something from you and me wanting something for you. And when you live a just cause, you want something for people. I think that, again, is what's made our John Maxwell company so successful. Because when I started it, I was asked, well, are you willing to give this your name? And I hesitated for a few weeks because I thought, I've worked hard on building my name. Good Lord. What happens if I give my name to somebody that just foolishly doesn't live my values? And I had to really think that through. But I gave my name for this cause because this cause is service oriented. It's to help people, to add value to people. I said, I want my name to be connected with people, to really make a difference with people. A just cause is resilient. It will literally endure all the political, cultural, technological changes in a culture. It really will. And it's idealistic. It's big, it's bold. To be honest with you, it's beautiful. It's big, bold, beautiful, and usually not even achievable. But that's okay, because the cause, the mission, the purpose is worth what we're doing. So I've given you two pictures of legacy. One is a clock. What are we doing right now? One is a compass. Where are we going? And the third one is companions. Who's going with us? In other words, when I take this journey, who am I going to take with me on this? This is huge. This is huge. I can remember under President George W. Bush's administration, they asked me to go spend a day with the CIA. And they wanted me to talk to their top, maybe 600-700 leaders about leadership and really kind of get them on the same page. And they kind of wanted to, I think they wanted me just to come in and give the leaders of the CIA some purpose and some motivation. So I went there. That was a very interesting experience. When you come to the gate, they take everything from you. You carry nothing on the inside. The lesson I have, it's got to be memorized. No phone, nothing. So I sat down with lunch, and in the CIA, there are 3 different divisions. And they all operate under the CIA umbrella, but there are 3 almost different organizations within the CIA. And so I'm having lunch with about 20 of them, and they are the leaders of those 3 divisions. So we're having a lunch, and I can sense tension in the room. And I thought, wow, this isn't flowing really well. The people seem to be a little awkward with each other. By the time the dinner or the lunch was over, I came to the conclusion that they probably didn't like each other. In fact, I was bold enough that I finally looked at the 3 main leaders of the 3 divisions. I said, how often do you get together? And they say, seldom. We haven't been together for months until today. And I looked at them and I thought, well, how are you going to build a great organization if you aren't spending time together? And then I finally just asked, do you like each other? Now, that was a stupid question I asked. This is the CIA. All of a sudden, I could see them just say, come with us, son. And they'd taken me out in the back and putting a blindfold on me, and you never know where I went. You just say, John disappeared. I thought, why am I asking them, do they like each other? But to make the bottom line is, they didn't like each other. And now they're wanting me to teach them how to do well together. That's not possible. So when you're thinking of legacy, you got to think of companions. Who do I want to go with me? Who do I want to take the trip with me? In my book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, I talk about the law of the inner circle. Those closest to that leader what do? They determine the level of that leader's success. Wow. And so therefore, I developed a list of questions that I ask the people that are going to take the legacy trip with me, my inner circle. Questions such as, do they live out good values? Are their values kind of like mine? I always want to do a values test. I'm looking for values compatibility. Another question is, the people that I'm bringing on my team as in my inner circle, do they have high influence with other people? In other words, if I bring them on, I want them to be able to influence other people so that we can lead well together. Another question I ask is, do they have do they have high giftedness? Are they gifted well in the areas, especially that would complete me or complement me? In other words, do they have gifts that I don't have? Can they lead well? Can they equip other people? These are just, another question I ask is, are they just a good fit? In fact, I have my inner circle members go do something socially, individually with somebody that we're thinking about it and then they come back and say, did you like them? I don't mean it's wrong if I'm 75. Do you think I just want to take a trip? At my age with people that I don't like or that don't have my values. So that companion's question is really, it's just really, really important. Wow. So as I wrap up my teaching session on legacy, I just want you to know that you should be preparing to hand that baton off to someone else. And by the way, you hand the baton off at full speed. Don't wait until you're old and you're no longer running fast and you're kind of staggering over there giving that baton, because anybody knows in a relay race, the only team that's going to win are when all of the runners pass the baton off at peak speed. That's really, really essential. So just think of the three pictures, and as you think of those three pictures, just simply say, hey, do I have a clock in my life that just keeps me focused on the everyday essentials, which will compound each day into something big? That's important. And by the way, do I have a do I have a compass that's going to make sure that, my direction is right? And then how about my companions? Are there people that I love? Are they people that I care for? Are they people that, wow, I look up every morning and say, hey, we get to take the journey together. I close with saying that I, for years, have taught and trained leaders because I believe everything rises and falls on leadership. And when leadership rises, when leadership does well, it does well because the leaders have good leadership skills and they have good values. And by the way, when it falls, it goes down, it's because the leaders have poor leadership skills and pretty poor values also. So as you're thinking of a legacy, just, hey, keep that clock, keep that compass, keep those companions, just keep them in front of you. And visually every day ask yourself, what am I doing today that's essential, that's going to give a great return someday? I got to keep watching the clock and, where am I going? And activity is not necessarily accomplishment. Let me look at my compass, got to make sure I'm going in the right direction. And then, wow, who's going with me? Who are my companions going to be? If you ask those three questions and you keep those three pictures, I promise you are going to develop a legacy that people are going to want to pick up on, follow, and help you fulfill.
Welcome to the Maxwell Leadership Executive Podcast, where our goal is to help you increase your reputation as a leader, increase your ability to influence others, and increase your ability to fully engage your team to deliver remarkable results.